Thank you. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 205. A couple of things on the agenda today. So we'll chat about Pectra and specifically the client releases. And then there were a few things on the Fusaka front that people wanted to cover. And then Kev had some follow-ups on these node requirement conversations. So to kick us off, before we go into the client releases, Perry, do you want to give a quick update around devnet 6 and how that's gone over the past week?
Yeah, so devnet 6 is doing really well. The participation rate's close to the maximum what we'd expect. And the last couple of days, Ryan as well as Justin has spent a lot of time debugging the MEV stuff. So earlier today or last night, they were actually able to get MEV blocks in reliably, along with at least one with an execution request. So I think the MEV workflow is also looking good now. And we will, of course, be trying a lot more of it and making sure that it's robust over the next days. Other than that, I think most clients have also reached out to ask us to update their nodes to whatever release they're using / what they were planning on releasing. And that seems to be stable so far as well. So looking good.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for the update on devnet 6. Any other clients want to share anything here? Okay. Then yeah, we obviously have the testnet release starting to roll out. So for anyone listening, we're going to fork Hodesky on February 24th at epoch 115968, and then Sepolia the week after that at epoch, Sepolia on March 5th, epoch 222464. And we have some of the client releases that have started to roll out. Does anyone fear they may not have a release by tomorrow for their client? I think there's 3 that are out already. But yeah, does any team think they're not going to get one in the next 24 hours or so? Okay, great. So I will keep an eye out for those releases. And then as soon as we have everything, hopefully tomorrow around this time, we can put out the blog post announcing the testnet fork. And then on this note, Perry realized today that we do not have the system contracts deployed on testnets or mainnet. Does anyone want to do this over the next day or so, just to make sure that we have all of the different system contracts deployed? Okay, no volunteers. Let's follow up ASIC on this, but it would be great if we can have those deployed by, say, Monday's testing call. And then there's a note from PK. So Ephemery will support Pectra today. PK, do you maybe want to take a minute to explain to people what Ephemery is? I'm not sure how broadly known that is.
Yeah, I can quickly give an introduction. So Ephemery is basically an ephemeral testnet that resets itself every month. So we have a static genesis, and based on that, we just increase the main genesis time and basically reset the whole network to the genesis state every month. So we don't have any fund problems or yeah, it's basically a playground, so you can test things without caring about the history of things. And yeah, we're gonna activate Electra today in the reset today, and it's gonna happen at about 7 o'clock in the evening, plus 10 epochs because Electra activates at epoch 10.
Got it. And if people want to run a validator on Ephemery, do they have to register for the Genesis?
No, the Genesis set is open. We have a set of Genesis validators, but we also have a deposit contract. So anyone can deposit validators and do their testing when they're.
Awesome. Sweet. Anything else on ephemery? Okay, then and then one last thing I'll flag for Pectra. We're trying to move all of the EIPs to last call. I've opened a PR to move the Mela EIP to last call, which depends on all of the other ones. So a bunch of them have already been moved, but if you're the author of 61110, 7002, 7251, or 7549, those four still need to be checked to move to last call. So yeah, please have a look at those if you can. And I think that's all we had related to Pectra. Anything else people want to discuss? Okay, so next up, Fusaka. So first off, Mario opened a PR against EIP 7723, which talks about the requirements for the different stages of EIPs. And this one adds some potential testing requirements. Mario, do you want to give some context on the PR and what feedback you're looking for now?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, basically, this is the link that I shared in the chat. The basic gist is that we want to make sure that when a EIP reaches the CFI stage of maturity, we wanted to have a EELS execution specs and eased implementation. So if you take a look at the PR, they are like suggestions at the moment for CFI, and they are a requirement for SFI for the stage of the EAPs. And the idea behind this is that we want to make sure that the EIPs that reach these stages already have some implementation in Python that we can use to generate tests. And this simplifies a lot our workflow and makes sure that the testing of an EIP is not the bottleneck to get the implementations live. So yeah, basically, please just take a look at the moment. The PR is just a suggestion at the moment. It's in draft. But yeah, and the idea is that we want to remove testing from being the bottleneck. And one of the comments also that in the PR currently is that this seems like an overhead for EIP writers. But in my opinion, this overhead is worth it because by the moment that we want to put the test for the clients to consume and for the clients to test their implementations, we should already have the tests implemented. And also being yields the center of the implementations for all of the EIPs guarantees that we will be able to combine all of the implementations when the time comes for the fork to become ready. So yeah, in my opinion, and this poses a lot of improvements in the testing workflow, and it will be like a much better spot that we are in the EIP workflow once the testing becomes necessary. So yeah, that's basically just. If there are any comments, please just feel free to come here and post them in the PR. I'll try to push it from draft into non-draft in the next couple of days. But yeah, any feedback is obviously welcome.
Any questions, comments?
I kind of disagree, to be honest, because I think this could lead to a situation where the EELS team is basically the arbiter of opinions because they can choose to
Oh, you're breaking up, Marius.
choose to implement something. Sorry. The EELS team can basically choose to do something or like kind of prioritize the stuff that they are interested in, and there would be no formal way for us to getting stuff in if it.
So, and you feel this
Not
way about?
by the team.
Oh, sorry, you kind of broke up a bit at the end, but I think we got the gist. Do you feel the same way about testing? Is it like about specs or just yields? Or sorry, is it about like, yeah, just the actual spec, or like the idea that we want to have tests?
I think it's a bit different with tests actually, because you can just write them on your own.
Why couldn't you do this with yields though?
Well, because you still depend on yields to merge it in. If that's like the formal requirement, I don't know. Like, and also, it's not everyone can write the Python implementation.
But if they said they can't write the test, should we like?
If they can't write the tests, then this feature should not be allowed on mainnet, in my opinion.
Right, and you think that writing the Python specification is like qualitatively different requirement? I agree. Like maybe we should make it a PR rather than like a merged PR, and then anyone can obviously open a PR against EOS, and you're not blocked on the team merging it.
Yeah, I think I would be okay with that, with having like a PR.
Yeah.
Right. If making the requirement a PR to the repo.
Got it. Justin?
Yeah, we had a similar talk on the Besu team actually about this, and we kind of kicked around and steelman a couple of concepts. I appreciate the notion that having an implementation in a neutral place like EELS does in fact have a lot of soft benefits, right? It helps client teams start on an equal footing, and it prevents client teams from kind of having a first mover advantage when they're implementing something new. And I think that's good for prototyping. I think that encourages people to prototype in a neutral place. And the downside though is like, well, that's literally throwaway work, right? And that's a pretty big downside.
Well, it's not though, because it's a spec for Ethereum.
It is, but if I'm proposing an EIP and I work on a client team, I now implement it twice, right? So I think that maybe we could rephrase this as an implementation is required at a client, and you still need to have the EEST tests implemented for everybody to validate against. And so then you get into a situation where the filler of the test can be any client. And I don't know that all clients have that capability. I would think they would. But I think that might be another approach that we could take here. But I do like the idea of at least having a PR open and not having to wait on that. So I think the TLDR is, I actually see a lot of value in having a neutral prototyping ground there, but we do appreciate the challenges that Marius is raising.
Mario?
So yeah, I definitely see that this looks like like overhead and unnecessary work. The comment, I mean, the PR comes from a space where like we've been in the place before where we have like multiple EIPs that are coming together into a fork, and we have one implementation in one client and another implementation for the EIPs in another. And the bottleneck there becomes that we don't have a single implementation that implements every single EIP. So when the time comes, I mean, it's okay for EIPs that basically don't touch any other part. But for example, when we have important EIPs that like modify the block header and invalidate other EIPs or mess around with other EIPs in any shape or form, it becomes complicated to like merge both tests when you don't have a single source of truth for the whole fork. So yeah, well, I agree that that it's convenient for the client to only implement once. It's very convenient for the testing team to have like everything in one place. It simplifies the work. It like makes sure that we don't make mistakes when filling the tests, because that has happened also in the past. So yeah, I think it's a big advantage for testing, in my opinion. But yeah, happy to revisit it and talk about it. Yeah, that's just my opinion from the testing team. Yeah, perspective. Sorry.
I think, like, yeah, clearly there seems to be more support to making this like a PR than a merged PR for EEL specifically. That seems reasonable. And yeah, I'd be curious to hear from other teams and basically maybe on like the client implementation, because like, yeah, I don't have a sense for like what's the overhead of having an EEL's implementation, and like if you are proposing an EIP, like I don't know, is it like everyone else who's not a client dev would have to do this? So I'm not super convinced that like we should have a different requirement unless it's like, I don't know, client teams can save a significant amount of time by just doing that.
I guess that's fair. You're right that that which hits the fan will be spread evenly. I can't really speak to like what the overhead of a particular implementation is, right? Because it depends on the EIP. Like, for instance, if you look at Fossil and you wanted to implement it both in EELs and then Besu and then, the CL specs and then Teku, right? Those are going to be all very different amounts of work, because, that's an example of a lopsided feature that has a lot less work on the EL than it does on the CL. So I don't know. Yeah, I find the point that everybody is saddled with it somewhat compelling, so that's fair.
And one more question for Mario. In the PR, I think I left a comment saying we should have this be a should for CFI and a must for SFI. Is that still your perspective? So that when we CFI something, meaning we want to include it in some devnet, we have this be like a soft requirement, and then before we actually include it in the devnet, this goes to a hard requirement.
So I changed that in the PR. So I placed the should and sorry, I placed both modifications according to your comment.
Okay.
I mean, whenever it reaches a state that is in CFI, we step up anyway, and then just make the implementation both in East and Yields. So I think it hasn't been like a problem so far for EIPs. Like it's not like we are blocking the EIP inclusion in any way. But what I would at least like to see in the EIP workflow process document is that these two repositories are mentioned. So, it's just in the minds of the EIP writers. At least they would have like the idea they have to contact the maintainers and then make sure that the PRC is implemented not by them, but for example by us. If that's like a very big plus in my opinion.
Got it. Justin?
One thing I wanted to maybe get folks' opinion on is when we say should here, that implies that there are exceptions, and it may be the case that, a line or two in that PR outlining what is an exception and how it works would be useful. My assumption is rough consensus, right? When we're talking about an EIP and we're debating it, someone will say, hey, this should have an implementation. Then somebody else says, well, here's a good reason why it doesn't. I assume that is how that would go down, and I assume that could be a potential point of friction that we should be aware of.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's worth, like, we can run through the motions and see what comes up, but yeah.
Yeah, my question is about the prospect of the growth of the team, of that team, the Steel team or the Eels team, because yeah, they're like really understaffed. We on the Vertical effort run into this problem. They did a great work. It's not. I'm not trying to cast a stone here. I'm just saying. I feel like this is going to be potentially a huge drag. So we would need to have people working on eels or steel. Sorry. Uh, that would be way more responsive to what currently their bandwidth allows.
Well, I think sure we should scale that team, but also we should put it on EIP champions to write this stuff, right? Like, so if you are coming with Verkle, it should be part of the Verkle team's like responsibility to write these tests, basically. And I think that's the only way. Like, that's the only. It's the only way it can scale big enough where you want. Yeah, you want like a self-serve option. And then at some point, obviously, you want the testing team to review that, and we should have more people to help with that. But
right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like, yeah, the initial testing and spec pass should be the responsibility of the EIP champion.
Yeah, but precisely, I mean, I agree in principle, and this is exactly what we've done, right? I spent most of my months of May last year doing this, and then Ignacio took over. We had the problem that you can't just drop in a fork, the scope of Verkle or anything else that big into the test framework. You need to change the framework, which means we had to dig. And once again, the people working on that EOS team, they've done the stateless execution spec test. Sorry, they've been doing a great work. It's just that they had to do a billion things at the same time, and it took us maybe 6 months to do something we could have done in a week.
And what was the cause of the difference there? Like,
I mean,
not having someone.
Yeah, like input format. I mean, what was the cause of difference? We need to change the input format. We need to change some consensus rules. We need to change a lot of things in the code, and it's not designed for this. And it's like building a new client. I mean, it's like porting. Yeah, it's the same amount of work we did for Go Ethereum that we had to do for EOS and execution spec. But yeah, there's it can be quite involved, and unless you're intimately cognizant of the of that code base, you will need help from that team. So yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, just following up to Guillaume's point. I think I agree, and I think that the EELS team agree that we are like understaffed. Firstly, we have hired, and we are likely to hire further, so that should improve. Also, I think we've had a problem that like a lot of what we've had to do is just been catching up with all the work that has happened already. And so we've been like behind the curve. And so I'm hoping that once we get to a point where EELS is like ahead of all of the other clients in terms of what we're doing, and the clients are busy shipping earlier forks, and we're starting to think forwards to later forks, that should also improve the situation.
If people want to work with EELS, who should they reach out to? Mario?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Peter's comment. Same thing for East. So it was a pretty new repository last year, and we've been working hard on trying to make things like easy to improve and easy to modify. And it has come a long way since last year. We've been working a lot of framework updates and everything to make it easier for us to implement tests faster for you. And I think I agree that we are in a better spot, and we should be able to deliver things faster now. But yeah, anyway, who should you refer to if you want to? Yeah, I think anyone from the EELS or East team. So myself, Peter, Sam, or for example, Spencer or Dan from the East team, you can reach out to anyone from us if you want to contribute, and we will, of course, help you out and yeah, welcome your support.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? Otherwise, then I think the next step would be, to incorporate the feedback from this conversation in the PR, and then give people maybe a few more days to review, and we can probably get it merged the next week or so. Okay, well, thank you, Mario. Next up, I wanted to bring up the Pectra retrospective thread. So I believe every client team except 2 have put in their input. I think Aragon and Geth were missing, but everybody else had shared their views. I went through it 2 days ago before the last few client team updates came in, and even this morning rereading the last 3, it seems like there's 3 kind of core themes that come up over and over. One is people want quicker hard forks. It seems pretty universal. No one is arguing that we should do longer. That there were a couple like proposals for like 6 months, but I think in general, people want to see a higher frequency of hard forks, and then the corollary to that is that you need to limit the scope of what goes into a fork quite early on to achieve this. I think the other thing that comes up a lot is literally the conversation we were just having, agreeing on what's like the technical standard that we want to have for including EIPs. In this fork, there were a couple cases where we probably would have made different decisions had we had like a more thorough understanding of the technical implications of including something. And then there's many different comments and suggestions for just at a higher level how we could change the awkward devs process, ranging from like formal working groups in a completely different structure to a bunch of smaller tweaks. My like high level proposal after reading all of this would be something like we try to separate like what are the things we can do right now, and then what are things we want to take more time to review. And my sense is the one thing that we can probably do quite quickly is this idea that we could agree to finalize the scope for a fork once the other fork goes live. So we have a fork that's about to go live with Pectra. And then, if we wanted to use this as an opportunity to finalize the scope for Fusaka to only what's already included, this gives us time to, in parallel, start debating what should the technical bar be for EIPs coming into the fork after, and then other process changes that we want to make. And hopefully, like through this time where we're working on Fusaka, we can finalize that and then try to ship Fusaka in something like 6 months or so. So I'll pause here, curious how other people feel about all of this, if there's other things that people feel strongly about. But my proposal would be we would freeze the scope for Fusaka basically now-ish, and then this gives us some time to start debating the EIPs for Amsterdam and how we want to change the process, but doing so without delaying implementation and shipping Fusaka.
So one point I think that was underrepresented in that thread was the coordination costs. So so there's two from a couple of sources. I mean, putting aside for the moment the development, right? It's kind of assume a magical software development process where all the teams immediately magically produced the working output instantly. Okay, so there's still the testnet and the mainnet schedules. Now, we know from the ongoing discussions with L2s that we're targeting, what, 30 plus days now for apparently last testnet, my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, to mainnet deployment. Right, wrong, I don't know, but that seems to be what that's heading towards. So that's a month right there of latency, of kind of development dead time latency. And the devnets themselves, it's 2 or 3 weeks there. So when you have a year approximately, then that's not a huge overhead. But I think there's a fixed cost right now we have of this, and that fixed cost, my main point here, does not primarily come from the development process itself. It comes to the fact that it's being sort of deployed in a decentralized way by end users, whether these are L2s, who have to integrate it, whether these are home stakers, etc. So that there's some minimum time which makes sense.
Yeah. And my sense is like that fixed cost is like on the order of, call it like a month, maybe 6 weeks, where, you know, like, yeah, if we were talking about forking every month, I think that would be problematic. I think if we're talking about going from, you know, 12-ish months to six-ish months, that's doable. And the other thing as well is if, you know, we're just, quote, sitting and waiting for the fork to activate, if we really want it to be optimizing, then you can just start working on the next fork, you know, by the time that the first testnet release is out or whatever, and you get like another month. I'm not sure that that's super practical, but yeah, I think if going from 12 to 6 months, like the fixed costs don't dominate, but if we go from like 6 to 3, that starts to be like a bigger question.
Okay, I mean, I think that's at least defensible. Yeah, I would say once you start going to 3, it's if you're saying 4 to 6 weeks, basically that's like half the time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
Like very, I mean, at that point, of course, people can talk about, you can pipeline this or that with, oh, it's not just n+1, but also n+2 and 3, and people can get pretty elaborate about this stuff because whatever. But the point is, I don't know that I see the ROI in going that far for sure. I think there's a floor, and whether 6 months is at 4, maybe, but
yeah, and I just don't think we're that good yet. Like maybe in a year or two we can talk about going from 6 months to 3 or something. But yeah, I'm very skeptical that we could pull this off, even if we tried and did this today. Any other thoughts, comments? So I guess back to like the practical suggestion, like if we agreed to freeze Fusaka, this means currently EOF and PeerDAS are included in Fusaka. Those would be the two only things. We would freeze the scope with this, and then we can start discussing, you know, the scope for Glamsterdam basically in parallel. And I think prior to discussing the specific EIPs for Glamsterdam, we'd want to we'd want to discuss like, okay, what's like the technical bar and whatnot. Yeah. Then. Oh, then Ansgar.
Yeah, so I think overall I'm probably in favor of freezing the Fusaka scope now, but I just wanted to briefly make the argument. So for me, for example, I think we should definitely ship Fusaka purely based on PeerDAS. So meaning that if PeerDAS is ready and EOF is not, for example, I think EOF should go back out of the fork. But on the other hand, it could also be that like PeerDAS just still takes a while, and then that basically the EL is just sitting there idling for a long time. And so in principle, I don't think there's anything against that. It could be possible to say we keep having just separate devnets for features that for now are scheduled more for Glamsterdam on the EL side. But if at some point we realize we have the time and the test devnets are already stable for some other EL features, why not bump them and move them into the existing Fusaka scope? If just on the EL side that ends up being reasonable.
Yeah, I think my sense is we're almost never in that position. We're often in the position of things not being ready. But like if we this fork is kind of nice because PureDAS and EOF are so isolated from each other. So like, yes, we could probably make a call if, PureDAS is going to ship 1 month after EOF and we want to add one more small thing to the EL, we can probably do that. But I wouldn't want to pre-commit to this before we're in the spot where things are going so well that one of the layers is wondering what to do. Ben?
Yeah, I would want to include the two ModX issues in Fusaka, the one where I set the upper bounds and also the repricing, because they're like bug fixes rather than features, I would say. If we're expecting validators to go freeform on gas increases, they're like problems.
So not to get into the weeds of this specific change too quickly, but I do feel like, if we open the door to one small EIP, there's a risk that we get 6 small EIPs coming in. So I would want us to think about like, okay, what's the right way to do this, and when do we want to add such a change? Yeah, and again, like maybe this one is like, if this is more of like a security fix, then like, a new feature, then
it's sort of bug fix rather than feature.
Yeah, and then there's already a comment in the chat about the other pre-compiled whatnot. So like, I think this is the big challenge. Like, do we actually freeze or not freeze? And then if we have like something like a soft freeze or whatever, then we'll be back in the same situation where we didn't actually freeze the fork. Like kind?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are overreacting to the situation that happened with Pectra in a lot of ways, because we're kind of going from this place where with Pectra, we sort of continued adding stuff in, sort of just tried to do a lot of stuff in parallel, and it sort of blew up in our face. And now it seems like we're coming back and we're like going even farther on the other end, and we haven't even shipped this fork yet. And we're talking about freezing the spec for the next fork, which, this is like a year out. And basically nothing in the fork, at least on the EL side, is really related to any of the things that have been hot topics for Pectra or in general right now. Things like improving the censorship resistance, increasing the throughput of the EVM, all of these things. So I find it difficult to say like we're gonna freeze the fork right now, when that kind of means that we're not going to have any of these things that feel important today for 2 years. We can say we're going to try and do these 6 months forks, but like the reality is it's not going to happen almost certainly. So like even if we do 8-month forks, it's like that's 1.5 years minimum before we start seeing some of the stuff that feels important today. So it seems too early to totally freeze these things. I also think that like the things in the fork are not really that important. Like PureDAS is clearly one of the most important things for us to be doing right now. We want to increase the throughput that the chain can handle, and it's not just a CL change. Like we do need to think about how to improve the transaction pool on the EL. And if we're doing other stuff, then that's time that we're not going to be able to spend working on those things. So I think that like EOF on the EL does not really make much sense given like where we are today. We're also in this moment where ZK EVMs are advancing rapidly and we don't know what the end state is going to be. So I don't see a reason to make a massive change to the VM when we don't know how ZK EVMs are going to interplay with this in 3 years. So I think we just need to let the dust settle a little bit. We need to try and figure out what EIPs fit best with the goals we want to have in the next 12 months and then go from there.
So there's a couple hands up, I guess just 2 things I'll flag. One is, to the extent we spend many months debating what goes into the fork, it will delay how quickly we ship it. So if we want to at least have a chance to ship it in 6 months, then we need to like effectively not be debating the scope.
Yeah,
but it's
but
true,
we need
like
to ship stuff that matter and
Yeah.
things that are important today. And I think that like just shipping stuff at a cadence, just to ship stuff, is not really moving the needle for this project.
so, and the Pectra is not live, so like we still have, call it like a month and a half. Like, to what extent would that be sufficient to actually finalize the scope? Like, if we think there are other things that are important, or like that we need to prioritize, or new things that we need to prioritize, like what is the blocker to making that decision in like the next 6 weeks? Yeah, Roman.
Yeah, so my immediate reaction to what Light Clan has said is that like we would never get to a faster pace if we don't commit ahead of time to the scope. And I agree, like we can use all of the time remaining until the Pectra lands on mainnet to still finish this discussion if it is unfinished. But otherwise, like when Pectra lands, we should not just keep debating EAPs that are not ready. And
sorry, yeah, finish.
Sorry, yeah. And if these EAPs are really important, then we can already start working on them, but for the fork after. Like otherwise, we'll never improve the pace.
Thanks. Potus?
Yeah, so I think it's true that not agreeing on the scope of a fork delays it slightly, but I think the actual bottleneck here is on testing. And I think it's unreal to expect that we first need to agree among all clients on what we're going to implement, have a devnet among all clients, and only then we actually spin a proper devnet. I think if we want to increase the throughput of forks, instead of like arguing forever about what has to be included and what's not, we should like try to have devnets of features when just a few clients are ready and stop waiting for other clients to be ready. We should like agree on having several devnets in parallel, and as those devnets start maturing, other clients can catch up. But I think it's on the testing front that we need to focus our efforts to increase throughput, and we should stop arguing about forks scopes, because that's really a waste of time. We should more be concentrate on shipping, coding, and start testing earlier, even if some clients are not ready.
So I guess, yeah, maybe two thoughts there. One is like, so we already do kind of do this to some extent, like, PeerDAS and EOF and Verkle all have devnets. One thing though is like, I think a devnet or like testing should be necessary but not sufficient to go into a fork. Like, I don't think we want to move to a spot where like anything that anyone's able to put on a devnet is something we want to include. At the very least, we might make bad decisions, and like it feels like also like a DOS vector for all core devs.
Yeah, no, I didn't argue that. We can have in parallel the discussion of what's the scope, but I think that our bottleneck today is testing and it's not scoping. So we should be testing, and then in parallel we agree whenever we feel okay, the next fork is EOF and PeerDAS, and we have this already tested enough, we can just ship it immediately. We should stop.
Well, that's kind of, I guess that's kind of this, like, how would that be different than the world we are today? Like, we have devnets for EOF and PeerDAS, for example.
I think I also want to bring up the point that Marek said.
We do not have a devnet for EOF and PeerDAS. We do. Some devnets for EOF and some devnets for PeerDAS.
No, we have a devnet with multiple clients, if not all CLs on PeerDAS and all ELs on EOF. So that is the canonical devnet. We have a breakout room.
This is the one that you just spin up last week?
Exactly. Both of them were spun up last week, and we have 4 PeerDAS devnets. And the third one, we also realized a lot of things that weren't working. The fourth one had a lot of reworking, clients implemented. So this is all part of the testing cycle is what I want to mean. And I do want to bring it up to Marek's point, scoping is the issue. If today ACD was to agree that fossil, ILs, whatever is the other feature that we want to completely spend our time on, then we will be spinning up a fossil devnet as well. The moment there are 2-3 clients, whatever there is, there will be a fossil breakout room. There'll probably be an EELS implementation, East implementation. We'll onboard the whole thing. But the problem is we as ACD need to agree these are scope topics or features that are worth working on ASAP. And that's what we would assign testing priorities on. And we can't have that for infinite number of features. Right now, it feels like we're positioned to do 3. And I guess we need to agree on if we want to do 5 or 6. But that number and what the scope needs to be decided.
Thanks. Let's do Peter and then Lucas.
So I think this kind of comes back to the discussion we were having earlier about like eels and stuff. So I think the world eels would like to be in, which we're not in, to be clear, would be one where we could where we have like a list of like proposed features that are ready with complete EIPs and with eels implementations that are merge ready and with tests that are ready, and we could just say to all core devs, we're going to close the gate to new features now. Here are the options that are sufficiently developed to get into the next cycle, and then we can like close the gate now. The problem we have is that if we want to add anything that isn't EOF or PeerDAS, then those developments, like they're not quite ready, we don't have EELs, we haven't written tests yet, so we can't do that. So like the long-term goal should be to be making the scoping decisions about at this sort of stage, you know, towards the end of the previous fork, we should be scoping the next fork. But we can only do that if we have like a bunch of teams who are effectively laying the groundwork for everything that is incoming.
Thanks. Lucas?
So from Nethermind perspective, the scoping is even a bottleneck more long term. So for example, if we had a rough scope of Amsterdam, and I don't expect to have a final scope after Amsterdam, I expect this to change. But if we have some rough EAPs that that are most likely for inclusion in Amsterdam, and okay, we have vertical trees, but there are some question marks around them. Then we could also even now or in a short term provide some resources to work on them. So scoping even long term, and again, I'm all for adding changes and changing the scope if really needed, if there's a good reason for that. Especially, I'm not expecting finalizing, for example, Amsterdam scope soon, but just having some rough agreements on maybe a leading EIP would be really, really helpful for us to accelerate even further.
Right. So then, like, yeah, I think if we want to start having that conversation for Amsterdam, we need to finalize the scope for Fusaka so that we can move on with that. I guess based on all of this conversation, my proposal would be to still try to finalize the Fusaka scope before Pectra goes live on mainnet. This gives us 3 more ACDEs and ACDC calls. And I think a realistic timeline then would be we want all of the EIPs to be proposed by the next call. So people have 2 weeks to like propose an EIP. And then we give clients 2 weeks after that to review them and to share their views of what they think should go in, like we did last time. So 2 calls from now or a month from now, we sort of have clients' views and we can spend most of the call discussing that. And then I think for the call after that, we basically finalize the scope for Fusaka. Does that seem reasonable to people?
I mean, I do think the clients are kind of busy right now shipping a fork, so it feels not the best to also say, hey, at the same time, do the whole planning for the next fork. Like I get we want to be doing these things quickly, but like there are only so many people in this process.
And when do you think, so you think we should not start like the quote real planning until Pectra is basically done?
I mean, maybe not when Pectra is on mainnet, but I think that it's most likely that we will only be able to put full effort into thinking about the next fork once we have the testnet sort of live. And that's still, a few
That's
weeks
like 2
away.
weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, yeah, we can also push this back like, plus 2 weeks. So like, we can focus on the testnet over the next 2 weeks then. And people that are not client devs can also propose EIPs in this period, but then basically have like the deadline to propose an EIP be like a month from now, which is 2 weeks before we expect mainnet to ship. Have the deadline for like teams to share their views on this fork be like around the time that Pectra ships on mainnet, and then have like another 2 weeks that after that we finalize the scope. So it's like mid-April, we'd be finalizing the scope, which is a couple weeks after Pectra hits mainnet. I don't know. Does anyone think that's too aggressive of a timeline? Okay, then I'll make this clear after this call, but I think if you want to propose an EIP for Fusaka, the next month is your window. To the extent that client teams have spare cycles, they can start reviewing these, but then we don't really expect like a full review until Pectra is live on the testnet. And then we'll give ourselves like a call or two to discuss amongst those and hopefully finalize the scope by mid-April. Okay, and then yeah, to get a bit more in the weeds, Dano had an update on EOF that he wanted to share, both on the status and the scope. Oh, sorry, before we do that, I just saw Lucas and Ansgar. Do you want to share
Yeah,
final
so
comments?
from my perspective, mid-April seems quite a long time. I would rather have it earlier. And second comment, I would also like to hear some time scale about scoping Amsterdam, like when, not now, but like when we will be scoping Osaka. I would like to hear timeline when it's for scoping Amsterdam.
Yeah, and my hope would be, I don't know, maybe for Amsterdam, we can try to finalize the scope before Fusaka ships or something like that. Yeah. And yeah, to Dragon's comment, like I think we should do scope and async. So what I'm proposing is in the next month, people propose EIPs. So to propose an EIP, you open a PR against the meta EIP for the fork. So it's EIP 7607. There's already a bunch there. In the next month, people do this. Client teams review this async and then share by 6 weeks from now their perspectives on all of these different proposals and what they'd like to prioritize. I think we will have to discuss this on the call. So like, but we can at least do a lot of like the early triaging work async. So if there's EIPs that no one actually cares about, we're not going to spend time on them. And then yeah, hopefully by having these like async opinions, we can accelerate this. And I think it's optimistic to say that we'll agree to everything in one call. So, but I think the call after that, we're probably in a good spot. Ansgar?
Yeah, I would just say, and I understand we didn't really have a conversation about like what should be roadmap priorities and whatnot, and that's maybe a bigger conversation. But to the extent that we agree that Piedras right now is top priority, at least in terms of the near-term features, then I would still think it would be nice if today we could agree on this framing of we will ship Fusaka whenever Piedras is ready, no matter what.
meaning that if in 6 weeks we realize that PRS has progressed a lot during those 6 weeks and we're basically ready and it's just too late to add anything else, then even though we said today we'll only finalize in 6 weeks, we will still just close it and not add any new features and just go ahead. And the reason I think it would be really important to make that assessment now and basically say that's what we will do is just so that in those 6 weeks people already realize that it is worth trying to push on PRS as fast as possible, because we are not just gonna, have to wait afterwards anyway, right? Like basically, because if we don't do anything now for the next 2 months, it will just basically be in this phase of like, yeah, but there'll be one more round of discussion around scope anyway, so no reason to like prioritize it over anything else. So I would personally still want us to say Fusaka ships the moment PRS is ready.
Any thoughts on that? Seems reasonable to me. Okay. Okay. Now, Dano, then, do you want to give an update on where things are at with EOF?
You're speaking, you're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm not muted. So I put some of this testnet together, and I put it in mind with some of the discussions that we've been having around how we should handle scoping, and with the goal that when PureDAS is ready, we ship. So I have right now the testnet for Osaka split into 3 separate stages. Osaka 1, testnet 0, shipped yesterday. We have the old Pectra spec running, that's finalizing. There's one bug relating to 7698 contract creation, which is the right time we've been able to find it. This is exactly where we're supposed to find it. It's kind of an issue that'll come up a little further down the specifications as to whether we should fix it or not. So the next step would be Osaka 1, which is to do cleanup. There are some spec changes we wanted to do that we froze because we wanted to ship with Pectra. And these are mostly inside baseball for EVM stuff. We're changing stack orders. We're changing our hashing. The hashing is actually kind of a big deal, but I'll talk about that in Osaka 2. And just some minor things about, moving some of the pieces around. And the goal for this is to have this ready about the time the mainnet fork activates. So that's going to be sometime in April, I guess. So that's what our current plan for our Osaka 1. Now, what we got this thing set up designed for is that after Osaka 1, we could ship any of these features. If PureDAS is ready, then whenever it's down the list, gets bumped out to the next fork, Amsterdam, and we ship what we have today. So the next list is priority listed features that are feature adds, although I'm contemplating putting these first 2 into Osaka 1 because they're breaking changes and they're essential. So all of these are driven by community requests for some of the features that they need that they want out of EOF that are mostly strictly additive, except for TX Create, but otherwise add value for things that people need. So some of the discussions came from people I spoke with in Bangkok at DevCon. So the first one is to restore TX Create into the spec. We pulled it out for scoping issues for Pectra. And in combination with that, we would also remove 7698, the contract creation transaction. And that would change how we would bring EOF contracts onto the net. After this, I'm going to talk about pre-deploying a contract, which it dovetails in with the precompile issue. But the idea here is you would call a specific fixed precompile contract rather than having a creation transaction. You'd have an initcode transaction. So we would be able to keep the existing contract creation logic unchanged. And then we would move on and just have one way. So we would undo some of the places where we currently have the one integration bug that we have in the testnet that is exactly the right time we expected to find it. And testing process is working there. The next one is that the request with Sourceify to add a metadata section to the EOF container. This is just a container of code that's only in the contract and not visible by execution. This would be used to identify where you compiled your code from. And these next 2 are from a lot of different groups, Open Zeppelin and others, to be able to add some light level of introspection when we're asking critical things. Like, what is the type of the code? Are we talking about a contract, an EOF contract, an account, or an empty account? And also to look through the delegation, see what is this being delegated to. And one of the use cases would be like a smart proxy in EOF. There's an EOF rule that says you cannot ext delegate call to legacy. You need to make sure you're not going to accidentally ext delegate call to legacy. And now with Pectra, there's a new way to accidentally exe delegate called to legacy. So we would add these two opcodes in there. Now these three are strictly additive. They don't break anything. The top two are going to break things, but that's by design, and that's it's trying to make EOF the good final thing and make it a lot more stable for the legacy code. So one pitch is to move this into Osaka 1. But the big thing about this is that these are all priority ordered. And if we are at a feature where we've only shipped one of these in a devnet and it's time to ship a peer desk, we cut it off and we ship it. So there's a couple of other PRs, EIPs that I think are good to add, but not necessarily in Osaka. I mean, if Osaka was going to take all the way into 2026, I would say let's just add these now. We create delegate opcode and changing the contract size limits. So I think this is a good example of ones that we're going to push out to Amsterdam, but that definitely need to ship as part of increase the quality of life for developers, but they're not urgent to ship now. And there are some features that I would say are out of scope. EXT data and EXT data size and copy. We need to get some metrics from what's executing on the net when we ship EOF. 7701 native account abstraction with EOF. I think that should be part of a more broad-based account abstraction fork, a more holistic thing. I don't think the spec is quite ready, but I think it needs to go in. But it's not going to be ready by the third quarter. And also tweaks to gas introspection. Some of the stuff that's going on with the repricing group and some of the issues relating there. I think the safest route is to keep gas introspection out of EOF and wait until we see how that develops. There are some people who use it for anti-spam and anti-abuse, and in the meantime, they can continue to use their legacy contracts. So those are things that we might want to do in the future, but they're definitely out of Osaka's scope. So that's basically the plan, is that we wouldn't ship these in Osaka, not going to pitch these, but I have a PR out to add these 3 and ultimately remove 1 from the Osaka scope. So let's pause there for questions before I go into the issues with pre-deploying a contract.
Any questions? Andrew?
So I'm thinking if PRDAS and EOF are completely independent, why do we have to tie them into a single release? Like, can we release CL independently of ELs? And then we can release EOF when ready, like maybe sometime after PRDAS.
So we could, but we just haven't yet. And I think the overhead of doing forks, we should try and amortize the cost as much as possible across the different levels of forks. So shipping them together, I think, is the right solution. Not for technical reasons, but for process reasons.
Yeah, I think like if it starts to be more than a month difference, you should probably split them. If it's less than a month, it's probably lower coordination costs to put them together. I do think if this is something we want to maintain, it changes what we should include in the fork. So like if both EOF and PRDAS are like independent and can ship, with a CL only or EL only fork, and we want to keep that, then we should not add any EIP in Fusaka that actually requires coupling between both the EL and CL, because that'll be much harder to remove.
Okay.
Guillaume?
Yeah, simple question. How many forks are we going to need to ship EOF, like the end product?
1. Everything else beyond that is quality of life improvements. You notice that there's always new versions of Visual Studio being shipped, new versions of like Java and Rust and all the other languages being shipped. So the main container is going to ship in Osaka. And what we're adding there is quality of life that makes it better for people to use, but the core will ship in Osaka.
But there's something I don't understand.
There. Yes?
Yeah, like EOF was already a quality of life upgrade. So what's the difference between what's being shipped right now and what will be shipped in the future?
I mean, this just feels like a math, let's ossify everything now question. And the answer is, why don't we ossify the EVM? Because developer experiences and developer expectations continually grow and change. We need to add things like EVM Max, which is separate from EOF, to improve our numeric speed. We're going to need to look into adding an SIMD type extension when it comes time to add post-quantum signatures to handle large lattice math. And so adding these features, there's always, a need for quality of life. And just because it works within EOF doesn't mean that EOF is incomplete. EOF will ship and be fully functional in Osaka, as we could ship it now and be fully functional. Osaka 1 is just spec things we want to get rid of from a potential EOF quirks talk, since we have time to fix it. But if we needed to, we could ship it today. I'd rather not, but if we needed to, we could ship it today.
Yeah, but once again, the question is how much, like, when do we stop? Basically, when do we consider the thing is finished? That's what I'd like to understand.
The EVM or EOF?
No, EOF. Because EVM Max, you don't need EOF for that. Everything you just quoted, we don't need EOF for that. When do we have EOF shipped?
Osaka, asked and answered.
No, you said EOF in Osaka, and then there's this billion quality of life things that we can add later. It's not the same thing.
These are things in addition on top of EOF.
Right.
These
And I
are
guess the
features.
question then is like, if we have EOF, do we see that as the path to add further EVM features, right? Like something like EVM Max, would we imagine doing it just in EOF, or are we going to want that do EVM Max in the legacy EVM as well? Because if we see EOF as all of the future, all of the platform on which we ship all future changes, then obviously it'll never be done as long as we're improving the EVM. But if we see it as like one of two things we have to maintain forever, like legacy EVM and EOF, and that when we do something like EVM Max, we're doing it across both, that's like a different outcomes. Yeah.
I mean, EOF is versioned, so you can extend the EVM in future versions without like impacting prior deployed contracts with EOF.
All right, but the comment has been made last year that we don't want to develop too many, deploy too many versions, because otherwise that's a maintenance burden, and it definitely is going to be.
I mean, we keep adding opcodes to the plain old EVM. It's just the same difference. We're adding opcodes to EOF. I mean, when's the EVM going to be done?
Yeah. Ansgar?
Yeah, on that point, I had a question for Dano. So specifically, because it's kind of desirable to try to like have one version of EF that then keeps being approved until maybe a couple years down the road, we might consider having a second version or something. We talked a bunch like a year or so ago about this distinction between basically it's always easy to add features to the existing kind of EUF version because that just adds new opcode functionality, something that just like existing contracts that are already deployed don't happen to use, but they don't break, versus things that basically restrict the existing behavior, which is much harder to do in a backwards compatible way. So I was just curious, to what extent is this all designed from a mindset of making sure that the Osaka-1 version already has all of the types of restrictions that we would need, so that from then point onwards, whatever we end up shipping together in Osaka or bump to the next forks could always be added to the existing UF version without basically requiring a version bump.
Yeah, I think you described our strategy quite nicely. I mean, ever since Shanghai, what took so long is we needed to figure out all the things that we needed to change and ban so that we don't have to change and ban stuff for like 10 years. So that's why I got rid of gas introspection. If we get it wrong, we can always re-add it. That's why we banned code introspection. We can always re-add opcodes if we need to. But basically, once I get the TX create and remove the contract creation 7698, that should be the end of backwards compatibly breaking changes. Barring a security issue, I don't see us doing it. So everything described after then is strictly additive. What used to be banned is now suddenly eligible. So we have the XC code type. Previously, it would cause validation to fail. And after we add that, then all of a sudden it would succeed. And it did nothing to change or remove or detract from the previous edition. It's strictly additive. So anything that's going to be taken away is going to be in the first 1.0. And that's what's going to ship in Osaka. When we ship EOF in 1.0, the stuff that we're taking away from the EVM for security and enhancement purposes, we're done for at least 5 years. Ideally 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe forever. But barring a security issue, we're not going to be pulling stuff out of EOF once it ships in Osaka. And that I consider to be the 1.0. All the features we add after it, and it's structured to be designed this way, are strictly additive. They add features to it, they add value, they don't remove other existing behavior.
Okay, I guess
Can I talk
yeah,
about the precompile issue?
yeah. Let's cover that one and then move on.
Okay. So one of the things that we would need to do, so as background for this, one of the things that's considered for inclusion is EIP 7666, which is to write a contract, here it is, that basically covers what the old identity precompile does. And to effectuate this EIP, we're going to have to pre-deploy a contract in a precompile address. And that's something that we're going to need to do in the fork to make this happen. And to get rid of all the precompiles, we're going to have a means to bring this in. So I would like to, as part of EOF, utilize this to bring in the TX create and put in a toehold contract at one of the where's the toehold contract? So put in this creator toehold contract at one of those precompile addresses. What this allows us to do is allows us to get rid of EIP 7698, which is how we've been modifying the contract create transaction, and everything that comes in would come in through the new init code transaction type, and would call the precompile contract. So all of the logic of bringing bringing EOF into it would be condensed only strictly into runtime code. This is a chicken and egg problem. If we have one contract that can deploy via TX create or EOF create, then we don't need to have any other special handling. So we bring this contract in that does TX create, and we can get all of other toehold contracts. One of the neat things about this is because of some of the changes we're doing to the hashing as part of Osaka 1, is we're able to get more reliable addresses from users not depending upon their nonces. So with this toehold contract, we extend this out to layer 2s, we can very reliably get known addresses at known places if you use the same account, regardless of whether or not you're using the correct nonce number, and that'll make creating the same contract numbers across multiple chains a lot simpler. It also allows us to retire Nick's method that we've been using to deploy all of these system contracts. So we don't rely on nonce. We don't rely on accounts that have fake keys or unknown keys. We'll be able to have anyone deploy these contracts to that fixed address using a toehold contract deployer. So those are the big advantages of why I want to take advantage of this, is because it allows us to pull an EIP out of Osaka, and allows for stronger cross-chain address toeholds. And this is a request coming from the 0x people. They brought to light just how important it is, and I think we can achieve it with this change.
Any questions, comments? Roman?
Yes. Actually, my comment is on EOF in general, so I don't want to hijack a discussion if anybody has a comment on this thing in particular.
We can move it online. It's a very inside baseball discussion about should we deploy precompile contracts into as part of the fork or not. And this, we're going to be doing it for, have to do it for precompile, so I would like to do it for. I just put this idea out there, speak for discussion, come back in 2 weeks. So if we want to go back to the EOF discussion, maybe we should go there.
Yep. My quick comment on EOF, given the chat discussion, is it would be my strong advice, as Tim said, for Gift team to put out their opinion online for everybody to reflect and to make comments to it. And I don't want to reopen this discussion if this is something, given this is something that we already discussed multiple times, basically.
So to make it really clear, this is something that had been asked of us in Osaka. Oh, sorry, for Pectra already. We had a discussion that we didn't want to speak as a team. We might revisit this, but our opinions are, well, our individual opinions are well known.
I do think look, if we are going to have a discussion around Fusaka scoping, it would be good to have your comprehensive view. So I understand a bunch of people in Geth don't like EOF, and that's fine. I think if there's two reasons. One is if you think it's just a bad idea overall, then it would be good to have that articulated, or at least point to where it's been articulated. And then two, if you think there's higher priority things that we should be doing to Fusaka, then yes, it would be nice to also get this communicated and to move as much of this async as possible. If y'all want to write one blog post per person rather than one per team, that's fine. But like, yeah, I think having like a clear record of like what is the thing you object to and what are the other things that you think are valuable to do in the fork would be helpful to move the conversation forward. Marius?
Yeah, as I already wrote in the chat, I kind of refuse to like be lumped into a voice of Geth. I think I'm here as an individual, and if I feel like I need to speak up against the common voices, and if I feel like I don't know my voice is different than the voice of the Geth team, then I will continue to do so. And I think it's very important that like I think it's very important that people have faith, or that the community has faith in the individual people stewarding the protocol instead of just the team name, because I think the team name can be switched out and mean different things. So I think it's kind of weird to require us to state our opinion as a team, because I myself feel like I'm an individual here, and I want to be recognized as an individual. And I think it's very important to have distinct opinions. And the point about us writing down our individual opinions, I can agree with, but that will require a lot of time that we cannot spend on working. So yeah, but I don't think we should require teams to put out these blog posts where they like have to discuss internally, and if there are minority opinions in the team, they will just not be present in these blog posts.
When people say like we want to move more of the process async, that's basically what they mean. Like, what do you? The alternative is we have every single one of these conversations on a live call with 100 people, and I think it's fine that like we I think it's fine that like we have individuals who like speak as individuals and share their opinions, but I do think that to like move the process forward in a like somewhat efficient way, it's extremely valuable to be able to reference this async and to like, yeah, be able to, you know, have like a read on it and like not waste time on like 100% call if everyone disagrees with something or everyone agrees with something. Yeah.
You can always include dissenting opinions in the opinion.
Yeah. Or look, you can write like 7 blog posts for Geth and I'll link them together on one ETH Magicians post. I don't think that's like I don't think that's like the blocker, but I do think like, yeah, having a clear record of the opinion async helps move the conversation forward. And I strongly agree we shouldn't like force a single way to do it, and we shouldn't have like a template that people fill in or whatever. Like, it's fine if different teams want to voice that differently, but there should be something. Yeah. And yeah, also like just to be clear, at the end of the day, like we will have to move forward with a decision, and people will disagree with that decision, and like there's nothing we can do that'll get 100% of people on board. That said, we only have 10 minutes and we have 1 more or 2 more contentious topics to cover. So I think we should move on from this. I posted the dates in the chat earlier, but I think, again, we should try and have a month from now be the deadline for people to propose things in the fork. 2 weeks after that be the deadline for teams and individuals to voice what they think is should be included, what are their preferences. Spend a call on March 27th discussing this, and then hopefully 2 weeks after that, on April 10th, we can finalize the scope for Fusaka. But yes, moving on Kev, you wanted to talk about max blob flag and your node requirement EIP.
Yeah, sorry, still booting up. Yeah, so the max blobs flag, we spoke to the we spoke about it on roll call, because in the last ACDC, someone noted we should ask how the rollups feel about it. And I think Ansgar can give a summary if he's on the call.
Wait, sorry, I literally just was away for 20 seconds. I heard my name.
Could you give a summary of sort of the feedback about max blobs in the roll call?
Yeah. So basically, we presented the question and gave a little bit of an overview of the kind of the trade-offs. And so far, we only got feedback from a few L2s. The others were signaling that they basically want to have some time looking into this. The feedback so far seems to be that it would be mildly inconvenient to potentially introduce some additional instability in the blob fee behavior, but that if that, for example, would be a requirement for some additional blob throughput, so if there's a scenario where basically having this flag would later on allow for more of a headroom for increasing blob throughput, then that would be a trade-off that they would feel like would be they would be strongly in favor of. Yeah, and that but that yeah. So basically that's it. Like mildly inconvenient on the fee market side, but as a trade-off, reasonable.
Cool. And I think in terms of ELs, we've not gotten an opinion from Aragon about how they feel. I don't know if anyone from Aragon wants to share their opinion on it. Maybe they're not on the call. Oh. Nope. Yeah, I guess we can get that async. As far as I know, all the other clients are okay with the flag, the ER clients. Unless someone wants to say something else.
Last call. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe like, yeah, if we don't hear back from like Aragon in the next day or so, we can move forward and merge this.
Cool. Yeah, I can also ping Aragon again to see how they feel. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the reason this flag was sort of brought up initially was due to sort of we've having this contention between home stakers not being able to sort of follow on with the full throughput. And then this sort of allows them to choose a lower throughput than what the system can allow based on their bandwidth requirements, bandwidth restrictions, sorry. So then I'd like to move on to the hardware requirements doc and ask sort of maybe Nixa, if you're on the call, sort of your opinions about max blobs with relation to the bandwidth document now. Since that was sort of the main feedback about the current numbers. Or anyone else, yeah. This call has gone pretty quiet.
Yeah. Okay, well, if no one has strong opinions on this, we can.
I will say
yeah.
I have no pushback against Max Bob flag, but I do think that it's important to sort of spec out what difference that's going to make in terms of rewards, because if it economically disadvantages smaller stakers, then we might as it's almost like we might as well get rid of them. If we're saying you can participate, but your rewards are going to be lower, then we're essentially just not valuing the same, and eventually they're not going to exist.
So I think I disagree with that. I think there's like two, when we say home stakers, I don't think we should conflate sort of home stakers who locally block build with home stakers who use MEV Boost. That's the first one. If you're using MEV Boost, you're still sort of contributing to like decentralization of stake if you're a solo staker. If you're locally block building, that's for censorship resistance of transactions, right? So like just even if you're like contributing like free blobs, you're still sort of contributing to the decentralization of stake. In terms of the difference between locally block building and MEV Boost, I think it's like large enough that sort of reducing the difference between MEV Boost and locally block building is large enough that you're already taking this deficit, right?
Sorry, which are we talking about? Max blobs or building locally? Because I think those are two separate issues, because not building locally actually makes you more profitable. But
right.
If you're not including blobs, I assume that you will be less profitable.
They are exactly the same thing. So in MEV Boost, you won't be limiting blobs at all, because that's all coming from the builder. Whereas it's only when you're locally building, where you're already less profitable, that this flag would take effect.
Ah, I see.
So yeah, you're already not profit maximizing. And I guess there's a question that I had in the chat is like, Kev, do you have a sense for like what the two deltas are? Like the difference between MEV Boost and no MEV Boost, and the difference between like MEV Boost or no MEV Boost with blobs and no MEV Boost without blobs?
I mean, if we're realistic, blobs hardly pay anything anyway, so it's not really.
I do take that back. This is only relevant when you are building locally, because anybody who's building locally already is taking the hit.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're all on the same page about this one.
And also, you will have slightly more bandwidth because you build smaller blocks, because there's so much private order flow missing.
Anything else you wanted to cover, Kev?
We have like 1 minute, and I feel like the local block building part was the most contentious, so I might just try to roll it over to another call again. But it seems like local block building is okay. I don't see any.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think that was the main contention. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for doing this work of helping us wade through these contentious questions. Yeah, I think it'll be good to have a formal definition at the end of it. Anything else people want to bring up as we wrap up? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. And yeah, please share your client releases as you have them in the next day or so, and we'll announce the Pectra testnet hard fork. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.